Hello, I'm Askar Sherliyev and you're watching news from Kazakhstan. Questioning via Skype, which was proposed, is not going to happen. On Thursday, Judge Mirzabekov declined the petition of Venera Sarsenbina over the case of inciting social hatred by oppositionist Vladimir Kozlov, public activist Erik Sapargali, oil worker and civil activist Akhjanat Aminov. On Wednesday, the attorney of Vladimir Kozlov asked the court to interrogate via Skype the chairperson of the editorial board of Golos Respubliki newspaper Irina Petrushova, editor of Vzglyad newspaper Igor Wieniawski, vice president of the Polish Foundation Open Dialogue Lyudmila Kozlovskaya, and politician Mukhtar Ablazov.
The judge did not explain his rejection to hear the witness. According to the prominent human rights activist Evgeny Zhovtis, this is not an ordinary matter. The defender explains that usually in such cases the judge announces a recess and goes to the conference room for adjudication. Zhovtis says that this time the judge displayed a clear case of a disinterest in witness testimonies in the interest of justice. In fact, Skype is actively used around the world for questioning of witnesses, and for example, in the Russian Federation it is now a common practice given the remoteness and distance between cities and villages. In this case, most of the alleged witnesses do not reside in Kazakhstan, and the charges brought against the accused are serious. Therefore, the judge had to conduct the questioning via one of the modern means of communication. If the court wants to carry out an argumented verdict, one that considers all possible nuances, and we are talking about individuals like Ablazov, Kitibayev and Petrushova, who are mentioned several times by all witnesses, then references should be made to their words and actions. And finally, if we are talking about Mr. Ablazov, then there are at least 2 leaflets of his authorship. It is obvious that if these leaflets were aimed at a violent overthrow of the constitutional regime, or to incite social hatred, or even to propagate social superiority, then it is only logical to ask the authors.
At the same time, Kazakhstan's legal system already has the experience of using video conference during trials. Anonymous witnesses gave their testimonies against defendants in the initial Zhanaozen process. Alexander Bazhenko testified against Janat Moranbayev using the alias Kairat Alpazbayev, but later revealed his real name and said that detectives actually forced him to testify following 3 days of brutal tortures, which resulted in a broken hand and a head injury. The young man claimed that he and all other detainees were humiliated at direct president's order, or at least that's what the detectives told him. On December 18, 2012, they arrested me almost at my house, took me to their car and beat me up. Afterwards, I was taken to the garage of the City Department of Interior Affairs. There, they kept me just in my sock, standing in the water for 10 hours. I was also beaten there and ended up with a broken forearm. Cops tortured me and forced me to give false testimonies in order to jail innocent men. Russian expert Mikhail Grachov, who was invited to the court over the case of Kozlov, Sapargali and Aminov, surprised the observers by his evaluation that reassures that an authority is a social group.
Given that the expert is from Nizhny Novgorod, there was little chance that he would not encounter high-profile trials involving such charges in Russia. In 2009, there was an attempt to charge a civil activist from Chelyabinsk with inciting hatred against a social group, namely the authorities. The incitement of hatred was expressed in the form of blog posts with accusations against officials and law enforcement agencies. The trials proved that calling the authorities a social group is questionable at best, and only the Supreme Court could clarify the situation. In the end, it was ruled that the authorities are not in fact a social group, and all lawsuits against activists were dropped. Lev Ponomarev, who monitors the process, used this precedent as the main argument to prove the weakness of the accusations. In the indictment, it says that the authorities is a social group, which became the victim of social hatred. Russian human rights activists managed to remove these concepts through the Supreme Court, which clarified that there is no such social group as the authorities. Therefore, it is impossible to incite social hatred against them, and it is wrong to charge opposition with this. At some extent, the opposition will incite hatred against the authorities, but since we are not talking about a social group, this cannot be grounds for criminal prosecution. Mikhail Grachov, Ph.D., is the head of the Russian Philology and General Linguistics Department of the Dobrolyubov State Linguistics University in Nizhny Novgorod. Grachov graduated from the Gaidar State Pedagogical Institute, completed his postgraduate studies in Lobachevsky State University, and obtained his doctoral degree in St. Petersburg State University. Grachov's research interests include social options of Russian language, speech culture, lexicography, and forensic linguistic examinations. He heads the Laboratory of Socio-Psycholinguistic Researches, is a member of the Guild of Linguists Experts on Information and Documentation Disputes, and editor of the scientific review Language, Speech Activity.
German Government Commissioner for Human Rights Markus Lerning shared his views on Thursday on his trip to Zhanaozen to journalists in Almaty. Mr. Lerning mentioned the positive dynamic of the general development of the country. However, German ombudsman noted that in 20 years of independence, Kazakhstan is still poorly developed in terms of human rights as opposed to other post-socialist states as Poland and Baltic states, providing an example of the trial over politician Vladimir Kozlov.
Vladimir Kozlov cannot be charged just because he stood up for the oil workers and tried to help them. The function of any political party is to represent the interests of the population, especially when people need help. And that's just what his party did. Marcus Learning is puzzled by the charge itself, since the concept of inciting social hatred is very vague and abstract. He's also surprised with a politician who is performing his direct duties is incriminated using a chapter of the criminal code. The ombudsman didn't speak about the openness of the trial, as he spent only a couple of hours in the courtroom. The question was, did you have free access to the hearing? And he said, of course, the doors were open. So there is some mistranslation here. Indeed, there were no physical obstacles in getting into the courthouse, which doesn't necessarily mean that the trial is fair and transparent. I could not say anything of the quality and openness of the process. It would be difficult to answer this question after just 2 hours.
Next report shows the meeting of the German Human Rights Commissioner with Zhanaozen residents.
At least 90 people were injured, and only 20 of them regularly attend such events. Others are afraid. They are really frightened. Around 10 people from Zhanaozen gathered at the house of one of the victims to meet German human rights activists. The information about the meeting was sent to everyone, but not many dared to accept it, as Hassan Dusikenov, who lost his son during the December massacre, explained to the guests. People are afraid of persecution on behalf of law enforcement agencies. Marcus Learning was quite surprised to hear this and asked for details. They pressure us, and that's why everybody is afraid to gather. German ombudsman who is privately visiting Zhanaozen is carefully examining the x-rays of Dusen Nurov's splintered leg. Nurov himself calmly spoke of what happened on December 16th when he was shot by the police just because he stood at the square demanding adequate pay for his hard labor. Lenin could not conceal his shock after hearing the story. How many more people have been injured, and what kind of help are you getting now? There are many injured in this city, but there are even more of those who suffered morally. People received almost no help from the government, except for the lump payment that was barely enough to bury their son and organize the first wake, says Raya Yusupova. It is as if we do not exist for our authorities. All of this happened right in their country. They killed our only children, but they want to pretend that everything is nice and rosy here. After the meeting with the victims, Marcus Learning went on to see the wives of oil workers. The exhausted and frightened women, including the mother of one of the oilmen, met him at the apartment of one of the convicted oil workers, Baurjan Nepes. Once they saw the camcorder, they asked to keep the conversation off record, since officials advised them to avoid speaking to Stan.TV reporters. As was requested, the meeting with Marcus Learning was left private. When I return to Germany, I will report on my trip, what I saw, what information I received, and what people told me. The next step might be to appeal to the government of Kazakhstan, as it seems that they did not investigate the December events in Zhanaozen well enough, while the prosecutor's office did not publish the results of its investigation. As for the families of convicts, they are in a very difficult situation, and perhaps a pardon could be an appropriate measure now. These families are suffering due to lengthy prison terms, so such a step could have led to a reconciliation in civil society.
On Thursday, the appellate judicial panel of Mangistau Regional Court left unchanged the verdict of 12 convicts of the case of mass riots at Chetper station on December 17 of last year.
On May 21st, 5 people were sentenced to terms of 5 to 7 years in prison. 6 were pardoned and 1 was fully acquitted by the Aktau City Court. Residents of Chetper village were charged with organizing mass disorders and resisting police.
The oil workers of Zhut company, which is one of the daughter enterprises of Kazmunaygas, complained to the management on low salaries and labor conditions. Now all the workers are forced to write refutals as if they signed the appeal by mistake.
According to one of the oil workers who spoke to Radio Azatik, one by one, men were invited to the office of the management, where they were told to write explanatory notes and drop their claims. The employees, however, are not planning to do so, saying that their wages are lower than those of colleagues from other Kazmunaygas subsidiaries, and the company is cutting back on social benefits.
President of Uzbekistan Islam Karimov arrived in Astana with an official visit on Thursday. He was met by the President of Kazakhstan Nursultan Nazarbayev personally in the airport.
Karimov will spend 2 days in Kazakhstan discussing issues of bilateral cooperation and partnership within international organizations, as well as signing several agreements. The leader of Uzbekistan arrived to Astana at the invitation of President Nazarbayev. Last time Karimov was in Kazakhstan in 2011 for the SCO summit, but chose to ignore the CSTO gathering, later announcing the country's withdrawal from the organization.
Law enforcement agencies continue to keep silence of the explosion which took place on September 5th in Atyrau. This fact was left unmentioned by the chairman of the National Security Committee of Kazakhstan, Nurtay Bakayev, as well.
No comment on the blast in Atyrau. On Thursday, the chief security officer of the country accompanied the Pope's envoy to the new mosque in Astana, opened by President Nursultan Nazarbayev this summer. The excursion through the halls of the mosque took only several minutes. Among other officials present was the Religious Affairs Chair Khairat Lama Sharif. Unlike the head of the National Security Committee, he was more eager to comment on the recent blast in Atyrau, condemning the act without going into many details. I am outraged by the interest of young adults in unconventional religious movements these days, and I am not the only one. The government is also against them, as well as the people. I think that the Almighty God does not approve of it either. Recent explosion in Atyrau was probably carried out by religious fanatics, and Allah punished them. There is a saying, curses come home to roost, and this is true.
However, the residents of the areas close to the place of the blast in Atyrau were willing to recall the incident. Human rights defenders, former servicemen, MPs and experts agree that the state missed the opportunity to capture terrorists, as now they are going underground, while the state was too busy persecuting opposition leaders.
Following the blast which killed one person in Atyrau on September 5th, the authorities haven't released any information about the incident for already 2 days. At the moment, it is only known that the explosion occurred in a private house on the corner of Moldagulova and Bautin streets. The investigation of the scene is currently underway. I'll refrain from making comments for now. Addressing the General Prosecutor's Office didn't shed any light on the situation either. I can't tell you anything simply because I have no information. Please contact either our press service or regional law enforcement agencies. So far, only the local residents remain the sole sources of information. Some of them heard the loud sound resembling a tire blast and later were registered as attesting witnesses during the investigation. The incident took place on the territory of 2 private houses with a common courtyard occupied by tenants. According to witnesses, the blast occurred in one of the rooms. People say there was a bomb, that's right. I've personally seen a number of their parts on Wednesday. I've been there as an attesting witness. On Wednesday evening, law enforcement agencies reported a casualty, a 21-year-old resident of Atyrau, Nurbek Sakaov. According to preliminary information, the explosion was caused by mishandling of improvised bomb. Atyrau community is speculating about what could have caused the incident. Social activist Takshan Kizatova believes it's the tensions within the society, closed trials, persecution of religious believers and accusations of Wahhabism force the population to radicalize. With the current situation, when the authorities are actively intervening in religious matters and looking at what is happening in the world, we can see that every action causes a counter-reaction. The head of NGOs agrees with the opinion of many experts that security officials have neglected the penetration of radical Islam in society while concentrating their efforts on suppressing the opposition and independent media. The human rights defender predicts that the youth will continue to get involved in extremism until the government starts solving social issues.
Disputes emerged over the portrait of a terrorist which were published by website Vlast. Analyzing the data of the Committee of Legal Statistics and special records of the General Prosecution Office, political expert Marat Shabutov came to a conclusion that the grounds for further development of the extremism in the country continue to grow.
A terrorist in Kazakhstan. Everyone has their own idea and understanding of the concept. Some insist on religious background of the phenomenon in the country, which has long been outside the interest of extremist groups. Others blame social problems. One fact is indisputable: suicide bombers were all young people in their 20s. Political analyst Marat Shibutov says that the terrorist activity has increased 9 times compared to just 4 years ago. Most people who call themselves jihadists are unemployed. They do not even have an average level of income. However, theologian Serik Amirgazin considers the Islamic link unconvincing. Even if terrorism exists in Kazakhstan, religion has nothing to do with it. Social factors are more likely to play into this. The theologian considers politics as a possible root of all evil, as some extremist groups can pursue their political goals. Meanwhile, in his article about the portrait of a terrorist, political analyst Marat Shabutov is surprised at the spread of radical ideas, even in city mosques, right next to the president's administration. The chief imam of Nur Astana Mosque is outraged by the raised interest in the issue. Bombings occur everywhere. We had some in Aktobe and Atirao, but if you look at other countries, you'll see there are bombings there too, causing hundreds of casualties. Why are you making such a fuss about it? Consultant at the Psychological Aid Service, Nazgul Mirmukhanova, knows firsthand about sects and unconventional religious movements. She nearly got involved in one herself. Now she warns the community and young people about it, as sects are likely to have their own agents' networks. We do not know exactly what is going on in these religious movements, but one thing is certain, they have good intelligence, wiretapping devices and surveillance. They also have great mental specialists who first dig really deep into your personality. A wide range of opinions make it even more difficult to search for potential extremists. The authorities have decided on one thing, to focus all their attention on young people. In his recent speech to the students of Nazarbayev University, the president even emphasized the necessity to toughen the punishment for terrorism.
Hijab issue is yet again being raised in Kazakhstan. Should the dolls be dressed in hijabs? Kairat Jaldabayli, the imam of the new Hazret Sultan Mosque in Astana, strongly disagrees with the idea.
Any doll that a child plays with leaves a trace in his world perception. With time, the child will try to imitate this stereotype. I do not support this new trend of Arabic-style dolls and headscarves. The bottom line is we need to raise our children in our own national way, including the ethnic aspects. The chief imam of the Astana Mosque also spoke against the dolls with skimpy outfits, as they carry not the best of messages. The imam is sympathetic to the dolls dressed in traditional jackets and headdresses, but not headscarves, since women in Kazakhstan have never worn them in the past. Dolls with headscarves also hit the toy market in the neighboring Russia, and the company which produces them so far has no plans to sell them in Kazakhstan.
A cleanup was held in Ilay Alatau National Park on Thursday, notorious for the recent mass murder and fire on Makhnatka Mountain. The event was held within the framework of the OSCE Project Central Asian Youth Network. The aim of the event is to promote the growth of ecological culture of the society, realization of responsibility of people for the environment, and environmental protection.
50 students from Central Asian countries have taken part in the event. Zaili Alatau's site was not a random choice. Most of the students have never been in Almaty before, and mountains are the main site of the area. To participate in the event, students filled out the application on the OSCE site, and only 50 were eventually selected. The first time I took part in the event, in 2010, when there were 7 participants from Tajikistan, and I really liked it. In 2012, the opportunity came up again, and here I am, doing social work. 40,000 euros was allocated for the project. The OSCE Center in Almaty covered transportation, meals, and accommodation costs of foreign students. Organizers say that similar projects will be held on a yearly basis. The participants of the cleanup hope that Almaty residents will be more conscientious and keep the rest area clean. OSCE employs a complex approach in security issues, which includes various safety factors. We spoke of environmental safety recently and came to a conclusion that if we wanted changes in the world, we needed to take action and do something. We came here to clean the gorge and show the fascinating mountains of Zail Alatau to the others, because most of the participants have come to Almaty for the first time.
A new national socio-political newspaper, Ashikalan or Tribune, opened in Kazakhstan. On Thursday, the founders organized a press conference in Almaty to share the news with their colleagues. The first issue on Kazakh language was dedicated to the well-known late public activist Altynbek Sasymbayev.
The publication focuses on current issues. It will cover politics, economy, culture, and corruption. The newspaper founders say that one of their strengths will be impartial coverage of what is happening in the country and within society. Chief editor Almat Azadi vows to publish edgy articles disregarding profile characters, positions, and connections. I'd like to stress that our publication is independent. People ask us how is it possible to be independent, but I insist that we are. The publication is indeed independent. It is sponsored neither by Azad nor any other political party or oligarchs. We are on our own. We are and we will be covering the truth, regardless of people, ranks, titles, and positions. The words were immediately backed by placing the photo of the president's daughter, Dariga Nazarbayeva, on the front page of the first edition. According to the newspaper, the nation's leader now has a new favorite son-in-law. Rahat Aliyev's spot was allegedly taken by Kairat Sharibayev, the head of Kaz Transgas Aymak, a subsidiary of Kazmunay Gaz. Ashikalan will be published 4 times a month and is already available for 55 cents per copy.
On September 12, Altanbek Sarsimbayev, one of the most prominent personalities in the politics of independent Kazakhstan, would turn 50. A week of memory of the well-known public activist has started on Thursday. An online conference was held at gulzhan.org website with Toligen Zhukeyev, who heads Altanbek Sarsimbayev Foundation.
He is remembered as a politician who managed to unite the opposition, yet he had been appointed to various high-level positions, including the Minister of Culture and Information, Secretary of Security Council, and Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Kazakhstan to the Russian Federation. Sarsimbayev resigned in 2004 and established Nargizakzhol opposition party. His assassination on February 11, 2006, was one of the most high-profile murder cases in Kazakhstan's history. Conferences and other events dedicated to Sarsimbayev will be held for the rest of the week throughout the country. It was obvious that Sarsimbayev freely spoke about weaknesses and criticized Nazarbayev's rule, hence he had conflicts with the president's team, some of whom were uneducated and useless, and others ignorant but pursuing their own interests. Perhaps some might say that I'm trying to portray the picture-perfect image of Altanbek Sarsimbayev, but it's not so. He in fact had his own political agenda, but they went along with those of the authorities because he would not divide them, unlike many other politicians.
This is all we have time for now. Thank you for watching. Stay well.